Hello everybody, my name is Necroxis. Welcome back to, I think, the last Shadowlands animation. This one is about Revendreth. I don't know anything about it, except from the previews. I'm going to restate what I think my theory is, based on what I've been saying for, since the animations began. So, if this happens to come true, it's not because I secretly watched it ahead of time. I mean, you can go back to the last video, and then the Draka video, and the Bastion one, and I said the same thing. I think this is going to be about Revendreth showing Sire Denathrius as the villain that he is, and you find out that he is pretty quickly in the game, once you get to Revendreth, at least, that is. And I think Garrosh is going to star a role, and we're going to see him drain out all the anima out of Garrosh, and I think they're going to kill off Garrosh, because he is not in the game anywhere. So, kind of like Ursoc, where they introduce him, but he's not in Ardenweald anywhere. It's because he died. But I think I think that's the same thing that's going to happen, because Garrosh is not in Shadowlands anywhere. Not in the leveling experience, not in the Covenant storyline. So that's why I think he's going to die. And so I guess let's just see what happens. So we're going to begin in 3, 2, 1... now. Okay, yeah, that's 100% his voice. Yeah, that's definitely Garrosh. What an intro.
To the good people of Revendreth, it is with optimism that I address you today. Though these are challenging times. Firstly, I assure you that our holy mission to help the most violent and wicked souls atone for their sins is and always will be our utmost priority. Our rituals
Who is that?
are effective. Our judgment keen but fair. We, Venthyr, remain committed to bringing eventual redemption to all who desire it. It is through your faithful work that even the most evil and prideful beings may ultimately be spared an eternity in the maw.
Alright.
Unfortunately, of late, the flow of such hubris-ridden souls has virtually ceased. And as a result, anima, our most precious resource, is in dwindling
Yeah, we get
supply.
it. He's a villain. He's
Even
lying.
we, the faithful who extract the anima, have not been spared the effects of this mysterious drought. Yes, we still have our old reliables, our workhorses. Yet I fear they will not be enough.
So,
We are doing everything in our power to gather more anima. But, simply put, we must all, rich and poor alike, make sacrifices for the greater good. Therefore, I have decided to implement a strategy of conservation and rationing, which should keep the anima flowing to those most in need.
this is like Blood Elves to the extreme.
In this manner, we will keep our people strong and our land healthy. Despite the efforts of those who would use this crisis to further their own ends and rebel against the rightful structures of our society. Rest assured, we shall bring these miscreants to justice. With fairness and mercy, of course. I am, after all, nothing if not compassionate. My loyal subjects, we are doing all that can be done to stimulate anima production and fulfill Revendreth's honorable purpose. Remain devout and resolute, and know that I will lead us all into a brighter future.
Roasted. I guess 2 and 2 isn't bad. 2 good ones, 2 boring ones. I mean, how many more ways can they just say, hey, this character is the villain? Like, why do they have to be so obvious about it? Like, clearly Denathrius, his name sounds like Nathrazim. Once you actually get into the zone, you very quickly find out he's the villain. But could we have, like, a little bit of mystery to some point? I mean, it's just... So we didn't, like, get any actual narration from Garrosh. We didn't really even see what his thoughts are. He's just, I guess, just a permanent source of anima? I guess he's just permanently... He has an infinite amount of... What would it be? I guess pride, if we're looking at the Miss of Pandaria like themes with him. And the Shah, his would be pride. And literally, Shah of Pride is in his raid. So I guess he just has infinite pride? Like, even Kael'thas, like, has a finite amount of anima in him that you eventually siphon out and he becomes good again. But somehow Garrosh just has infinite amounts of anima to just be used as, like, a workhorse. I feel like the first half, like, this should have been, like, twice as long. I feel like that would have been acceptable for, like, the first half. And then the second half should have been more things. Like, maybe Prince Renethal somehow gets into the area and talks to Garrosh for a second while he's not being siphoned. Or we see the prince at any point, because it doesn't seem like, if you look at this animation, you don't know the story, all of Revendreth are just villains. Like, you just have to kill everybody because they're all bad. Except, I guess, like, the common citizens. But you never would have known that there's, like, actually good nobles. Like, there is a good faction of people who are against what Denathrius is doing. You never would have gotten that. Like, I don't know. It's really shocking to me. Like, Denathrius is not interesting as a villain on his own. Like, the context of him in the wider universe is interesting, especially with what we were seeing with those certain books that are dropping, where Blizzard seems to be unretconning. Like, it's not a retcon because they're going backwards, but so I guess unretconning the fact that the Nathrazim are actually way more dangerous than we thought, because originally that's how they were presented, and then we had, like, a bunch of expansions where they kind of just seemed like bitches, and we just killed them, and they were just, like, cannon fodder. But now they're, like, unretconning that again to be, like, the actual true villains of the whole game. And it's, like, in that context, Denathrius is interesting, but on his own, he's just a villain. Like, he's very obviously, clearly a villain. And that's not super interesting. Like, he's not even, like, a good manipulator like someone like Gul'dan or Azshara is. He's just like, I'm a big evil dude with a sword. And I'm like, okay, like, that works. It's not like that doesn't work. That works as a character in a larger story, but to focus the whole thing on Denathrius just lying to everybody, it's like, that was better than Draka, but still very unsatisfying. And it's not because Garrosh didn't die. Like, I'm not upset that he didn't die. I expected that he would, because I guess I was giving the story a more benefit of the doubt based on Ursoc, but it's my fault. I keep having to learn my lesson. But it's just that nothing happened. Like, something has to... I went over this in Draka. Something has to happen that makes you interested in the storyline, or we have to take a character that we don't know a lot about and they have to become interesting. They told us, literally, the announcement at BlizzCon that Denathrius is the final boss of 9.0. And it's like, okay, well, you spoiled that completely. So the interest in him in that regard is gone. It's not like you couldn't tell from this that he was a villain, but at least it's way closer to when launch comes than at BlizzCon last year, like a year ago. So they didn't have that. They didn't really interest you in the storyline, because the storyline of Revendreth isn't about following Denathrius. Like, that's like 10% of it, and then you realize he's the villain, and then the rest of the zone is fighting against him. And it's just like, I don't know. It was better than Draka because Draka's a terrible character and she's boring and they haven't redeemed her. Like, they're not redeemed, but they haven't like made her interesting. And at least Denathrius is more interesting based on the sole fact of his place in context of the larger universe of Warcraft. But like, I'm only at 10 minutes in this recording and I'm really struggling to say more about this, whereas like with the other ones, they were like 20-minute videos, and I don't really know what else to say about this. Like, we didn't see Kael'thas. I just realized that. He's a main character in Revendreth. We didn't see him. We didn't see the prince, like I said. He's another main character. We didn't see any of the prince's allies, who are main characters. We didn't even see other souls in Revendreth. Like, those trolls that you saw could have been, like, one could have been Zool, very clearly. Or one could have been, I don't know, Zul'jin. Like, they could have been Zul'jin. Like, it's just, they could have made those trolls look like lore NPCs, and it wouldn't have added a lot, but it would have been like, oh shit, look at them, there they are. Like, interesting stuff in that regard. And it's just, I don't know. Not to compare WoW to Final Fantasy, but I'm going to do it. So all the people who get butthurt at that, get your downvotes ready. But I've been really, like, hardcore getting into Final Fantasy, and not just, like, playing the main storyline, but I've been, like, hardcore leveling alts, and I've been doing, like, crafting professions and doing a bunch of bonus side stuff. And there's so many good little stories in the game that you just don't know are there because there's no public testing for Final Fantasy XIV. So, and when they announce expansions, they don't come out and say, here's Shadowbringers, so-and-so is the villain of the expansion, and here's who they are. Like, they don't do that, like Warcraft does. And I don't know why they do that. I don't know if the story is just not interesting enough that they don't have enough to talk about unless they do that. But, it, like, the more that Final Fantasy XIV is great, the more holes I see in World of Warcraft. And it's just like, at the very least, don't announce an expansion and then say this person's the... Don't fucking say the jailer's the final boss. Don't say Denathrius is the final boss of the first tier. Let people explore that on their own. Let people have that... Like, imagine that experience if... I mean, even stuff as telling you, like, oh, Uther's in Bastion, and Draka's in Maldraxxus, and Ysera's in Ardenweald, and Kael'thas is in Revendreth. Rather than saying that, imagine the reaction of the community of getting to Revendreth, the last zone, and holy fuck, it's about Kael'thas, the character we've been wanting for like 10 years to be fixed after how terrible his role in Burning Crusade was. Imagine that feeling. Imagine showing up to Bastion right away and seeing Uther at the end of that storyline. Like, holy shit, that would have been amazing. But we know, like, they're robbing us of the best part of these games, which is, like, the shocking story reveal. And that's what Final Fantasy XIV does. The shocking story reveal is hidden until you get there. And if you talk to anybody that plays that game, they will tell you that is why that story in that game is fantastic. Because there are so many moments that even people in the community will calm down on other people if they spoil it for others. Like, if you ever go into any Final Fantasy discourse, like whether it's a Discord or a forum or the Reddit, people are constantly policing their own community to be like, don't spoil the fucking game because the best part of an MMORPG is the fucking story. They're supposed to be, at least, and you shouldn't be spoiling that. But not only are players spoiling it because public testing is a thing, and I do it too. I'm not saying I don't spoil shit, but public testing is a thing, and Blizzard spoils the game themselves. So fuck it. If they're not going to care, I'm not going to care. But I take a cue from Square Enix where they're like, we're not going to talk about like almost any of the story because that's our main thing. So then the community takes a cue from that and says, okay, we're not going to do that either. I wish Warcraft had that. And I've been watching Jesse Cox play through Final Fantasy XIV, and it's been immensely satisfying because I remember when he was on the Co-optional podcast with Total Biscuit, and both of them were kind of coming down pretty hard on Dodger, who was talking about how great Final Fantasy XIV was at the time. It was in Heaven's Ward, the first expansion. And it's great to see someone, another hardcore WoW fanboy like I am, finally admit, like, oh shit, 14 is better. Like, 14's story is so much better. And the best parts of 14 are not even in WoW ever at any point. Like, it's just satisfying because I was saying this on my Twitter yesterday. I really want to do this, but I feel like I'm not good enough at, like, video essays because I really haven't done that before. Like, I've made character videos, but I've never done, like, a full professional video essay examining a topic, and I really, really want to do one, or to have someone do one, on the topic of how World of Warcraft so misled so many players of MMORPGs into accepting what Blizzard is doing as the best that an MMO can possibly do. Because it's so not true. Like, it's so not true. And I feel like so many people grew up with the game, including myself, and for the longest time, I would say probably until the end of Mists of Pandaria, I thought this is the best that MMORPGs could do. And then like Final Fantasy XIV comes out, and then the Elder Scrolls expansions come out, which are also very good from what I hear. Star Wars: The Old Republic, even a free-to-play cash shop game, does story better than Warcraft. It's like there's so many other games now that does it better than Warcraft, and Warcraft's, they're not even trying to change to, like, match the competition. They just think that their status is like an industry, like that basically almost started the industry. I know they didn't, but they almost did, of MMORPGs. They just think they don't have to change because they're the titan of it. Like, imagine the next BlizzCon if they just announced the cinematic, and they just briefly talked about the story in general, but they didn't say who the villain was. They didn't say who the boss of the final raid tier was. They didn't, spoil major characters of the story. Like, if you go watch the announcement for Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers, even if you don't know what's going on, and just compare that to Shadowlands, and it's like, it's night and day. And that's, I appreciate 14 so much more for how they don't spoil their game. Because then you get stuff like this where they can't do much with it because we already know the big twist, we already know the big character that's going to be in the zone, and we already know where the story goes. And so I guess Garrosh is just still alive, which is crazy to me because he ain't in Revendreth anywhere. He's not in the leveling experience. He's not referenced anywhere in the leveling experience. He's not in the Covenant campaign. He's not referenced in the Covenant campaign. And most of the Revendreth Covenant campaign takes place after the raid. So you would feel like if Denathrius was dead or deposed or gone or whatever his thing is, if he was gone, you'd feel like someone would be like, oh, by the way, there's this orc in the basement that we're, like, siphoning all his health out of. But they don't do that. They don't do that in the raid either. Like, it's... What are they doing? Like, I thought Draka was boring and kind of bad. This was just, like, disappointing, which I think is like a different category. And it's just, I'm bummed out about it, man. So, thanks for watching, everyone. I'm sure we'll hear the litany of why this is amazing from all of the stereotypical people you would expect to hear it from. But as someone who has no financial ties to Blizzard, I can be honest and say that this was incredibly disappointing, and I'm bummed out about it. So, alright, well, I guess that's it. I know that we are supposedly probably going to get a cinematic with the Jailer because that PC Gaming magazine had a CGI screenshot of what he looks like. But so maybe that'll happen at some point, but I'll cover it if so. But until then, way to faceplant the landing after you had such a good beginning of the end with the last one. And I'm bummed out. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. But until then, stay awesome. Farewell.